everyone, and welcome back to my booktube channel, Lisa in Bookland, and welcome to the first part of my favourite books of 2023. I did intend to just make one video for this, but in the end I thought there was just too many books to discuss in one video with any amount of detail, so I decided to split it in two. And the two categories I have are historical fiction and not historical fiction, and this is the first one, which will focus on all my favourite historical fiction I read this year, and historical fiction is most of my reading, so yeah, all of these books I'd regard as absolutely wonderful, and yeah, hopefully I have a good mix in here. I did toy with the idea of ranking them, but apart from one book which I would say is my favourite historical fiction I read this year, but also my favourite book of the entire year, I think, below that I just enjoyed the lot of them equally, really, and you know, they're also different. I just find it really hard to rank things. When I was looking at the list of all the books I read this year, it was pretty clear which ones fell in the favourites category, but beyond that I don't know, I just can't do it. So yes, so I'm just going to go through them in the order that I read them, and yeah, if you want to hear more detail on any of them, I'll link my original monthly wrap-ups, or where I've done individual book reviews for them down below as well. So the earliest one that I read for the Irish Readathon in March, and that is The Ballad of Lord Edward and Citizen Small by Neil Jordan. I absolutely love this book, and it was one of the books I did an individual book review for, so I'll link that down below. This book is told from the perspective of this escaped slave called Tony Small, who saves the life of Lord Edward Fitzgerald in the American War of Independence, and when Lord Edward was over there with the British Army. As a measure of his gratitude, I suppose, Lord Edward takes Tony Small on as a servant and brings him back to Europe, to Britain initially and eventually to Ireland. And this book covers the kind of friendship that forms between them and how Tony fits into his kind of new life. So he's got his own personal dramas going on, but Lord Edward then is obviously a big figure in Irish history, as in he eventually becomes involved in the 1798 rebellion, so this book covers the build up to that as well. But yeah, I just absolutely loved this way of telling both Lord Edward's story, but just looking at a figure in history that, like, you know, that there is bound to have been around. We just don't have their voices currently, so that was really fascinating. But the highlight of this book really was like just the picture of Georgian society we got, especially Georgian Ireland. Like, they travel around a lot, but I just loved the portrayal of Georgian Ireland before the Act of Union and kind of the build-up to 1798, and especially the view it gives of Georgian theatre. It was absolutely so vivid, and definitely was a historical fiction highlight for this year. So another book I read in March will always be special, and that is The Secrets of Hartwood Hall by Katie Lumsden. So as a lot of booktubers, I was lucky enough to be at the book launch for this book, which is very exciting, but I was absolutely delighted to really enjoy this book afterwards. I read it in like a day and a half. It was such a page turner, gothic, really one for the book lovers, so many literature references in there, but also just a brilliant story. So the book follows this young woman called Margaret Lennox, who is a recent widow, but she's still very young. She used to work as a governess, and now to support herself she has to go back and work as a governess in Hartwood Hall. It's this isolated house out the country. It's very clear that there's secrets in the house that Margaret slowly uncovers, and also you find out information about kind of Margaret's past. I just absolutely love this book, especially a section in the middle. I just thought it was really brilliant, and I can't wait for Katie's next book, which is coming out in summer, and I'm sure will be even more up my street by the sounds of it. So yeah, really good book. So the next book I'm going to talk about I read in June, and it's another Irish book, and it's Trespasses by Louise Kennedy. I again read this in like a day and a half. I just, like, that's the mark of a really good book for me, when I just like tear through it. This book was nominated for the Women's Prize, and yeah, I didn't read a lot of the other books on the list, so I can't really have an opinion about that, but I thought this was such a brilliant book. It's set in the Troubles in the like 1970s. Bushla is a primary school teacher, and she's, I suppose, from a kind of nationalist background, Catholic, and that would be the school, but she also sometimes works in her brother's pub, which is very much like a mixed clientele, and in that pub she meets Michael, who's a barrister, who is from the Protestant side of things, and she actually starts an affair with him. And yeah, it's such a fascinating book about like the Troubles, but also just like Cushla and Michael's relationship was really interesting to read about. Like, I if you're one of those people that like if you hear the book is about an affair and you don't want to read it, like, I have to say I understand, because I am that way. Like, if this wasn't set in Ireland, I would have probably run a mile from it, but I kept hearing such good things about it, and really I just thought it was so considered and complex, gave me so much to think about, and the trouble side of things, obviously it was just so heartbreaking at times, just the way that people are trying to continue their normal lives against this background of violence, especially the way it affects her students in the school, obviously. It was just really heartbreaking book, but I really think it was like very sensitive and balanced portrayal of like what is really very recent history and painful for some people. I just thought it was really, really brilliant, and I can't wait to see what Louise Kennedy comes out with next. So a book I actually read in the same reading vlog as that one then while I was down in Cork was Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. This is obviously a book I'd heard so much about. It was my second Sarah Waters, and speaking like Trespasses, a reason I kind of put it off so much is the like premise didn't sound hugely interesting to me, or it wasn't something that like made me think I had to pick it up straight away. It's about this girl called Sue who kind of lives with this group of street thieves and in Victorian London, but it's not really about that at all. Like, it's such a long book and it covers so much, but really fairly early on she gets sent to be maid to this other girl called Maud, I think, in a country house to try and basically scam Maud. There's some LGBT themes in this book, which is brilliant, and also just it was so twisty, and you never knew what was going to happen next. It was like compulsive reading. Like this, as I said, this is my second Sarah Waters, but the first one, The Little Stranger, I had the exact same experience with. Like, it's just, you cannot put these books down, so I really must read more of Sarah Waters. Yeah, just the complicated relationships that are in this book were absolutely fascinating, and yeah, just such a page turner. Really, really highly recommend. So, do you know, a book that I like, this book almost didn't make this list because I really didn't like the ending, but I loved the rest of the book so much I felt like it justified its place in it, and that's The Proof of Love by Catherine Hall. This book, I was immediately drawn to this book by the cover and the premise. It's about this mathematics PhD student who's studying in Cambridge in the 1970s. For the summer, he, instead of like writing his thesis, which he's supposed to be doing, or taking on some academic work, he arrives to the Lake District looking for farm labouring, and he arrives to this man's house and offers to work for free. He's on a bicycle. He has no training in or background, but he obviously is a hard worker, so your man takes him on. It's really clear that something happened at Cambridge that has really disturbed him. I wouldn't have known there was LGBT themes in this book only for I bought it against the word. So yeah, he obviously struggles with his identity and something that did happen back in Cambridge he's trying to escape from for the summer. And this book is about his summer in the Lake District, about how he kind of becomes trusted by this family to look after things, and about his friendship with the 10-year-old daughter of the house, which is really nice. Just love books obviously set in rural settings, on farm settings, like reminded me of my own summers at home, I suppose. And yeah, it's a pity that the ending of this, I really, really didn't like it, but I loved the rest of the book so much, as I said. So yeah, maybe there's two books I feel really strongly about the ending. This book and Coming Home by Rosamund Pilcher. So if I ever reread them, I think I'm just like not going to read the last like 20% of it to save myself the trouble and just finish it off the way I want to finish it off. So yeah, I just really, really did like this book. So on to the book that I am saying is my favourite book of the year. It just made such an impact on me, and that's In Memoriam by Alice Wynne. Again, a book I made a full spoiler-free book review on, so I'll link that down below. It's about two public school boys called Gaunt and Elwood that obviously go to the same school, and they eventually end up becoming drawn into the First World War along with most of their school, and it follows their experiences and that, obviously. And a major component to this book as well, I suppose, is they have feelings for each other, so that's kind of dealt with throughout the course of the book. It was such an emotional roller coaster. Like, you know, the war scenes were heartbreaking. Lots of twists in there as well, and like depictions of prisoner of war camps. But I have to say the highlight was like the boarding school lens on it, kind of about how that particular group were affected by the war, but like, you know, they obviously have connections, so they're all like meeting each other. And also when the younger boys are still at school and they were receiving letters back from their like brothers or cousins or friends that were already at the front, The school newspaper kind of popped up multiple times with like the list of dead and things, and yeah, I just thought it was such a brilliant book. The relationship between Gaunt and Elwood, I was told from both perspectives, which was really nice, and yeah, just their complex relationships they have with all of their different friends, and yeah, their own identity and things like that. It was just a brilliant book. I absolutely loved it and can't recommend it enough. And finally then was a very recent read I finished off in December, and that is The Whalebone Theatre by Joanna Quinn. I absolutely love this book. So it is kind of as well set in the last two I talked about are the only two that are set in the World Wars, but this deals more with the Second World War. At the start of the book, the main character, Christabel Seagrove, her father has just remarried, so he's coming home with her stepmother. They live in this big country house in Devon near the sea, and one day like a whale washes up on the beach, and they actually end up turning that into a theatre that she puts on plays with her kind of siblings. They're very complicated family situation going on, but yeah, like it's such a wide novel, it's so hard to explain it, but and it takes place really over a good few years. So it starts off in 1919, it goes right through to 1945, I think. Obviously, you follow Christabel growing up. Her parents aren't very like attentive to her. They've definitely got their own lives. They have friends over to the house regularly. And then obviously when it does go up to the Second World War, the different ways that the Seagrove siblings end up becoming involved in their roles in it. Just if it's any of that sounds like it might be of interest to you, it's worth checking out. It's just very hard to know how much to say without spoilers, because it was just, yeah, so much to this book. So yes, hope that some of them might be of interest to you, and hopefully my favourite books of the year for non-historical fiction will be coming to you shortly. So yes, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday for my next video.